What's up, guys? I'm back today. I'm just going to do this Q&A video that I've been saying I was going to do for ages. I got a few questions from Discord and also some on YouTube videos. So I'm going to answer those in what I feel is the least difficult to answer to the most difficult to answer. And we'll just, kind of see some thoughts I have on things. So, first, a pretty simple question. Aratos, he messaged me and he said, "What do you think is the most busted deck in the rogue section of EdisonFormat.com?" And it is this, as you can see in front of me, the Dark Calling deck. Dark Calling is like, it's like budget Miracle Fusion, except it does something entirely different. Instead of summoning Absolute Zero, which this deck can also do because I do play one Miracle Fusion, instead of summoning Absolute Zero as like a wall and a defensive piece that will mess up your opponent if they get rid of him, you just kill them. You just summon Dark Gaia, or maybe you summon Malicious Fiend, who can also be a defensive piece. But usually you just summon Dark Gaia, you kill them. He has a lot of attack. He flips Hamster and Raikou without triggering their effects. He's just stupid. He's dumb. He's a great card. And just like Miracle Fusion, you can play Return. You play Stratos, you can play Phoenix Wing. This guy, he's huge, and you can also do things with him. You play Caius. Caius is a great card. Jujutsu Master? Kawakimaru Guardian? This guy is dumb. You attack into a set monster, it dies. It doesn't matter if it has an effect. You don't even need a rock in the hand. You just attack into a set monster. And it's probably Raikou, probably Hamster, you negate it. It gets it out of the way. Gores? Not a problem. Not a problem. And he has huge attack points for the Dark Calling itself. Now, recently, this question was actually asked a while back before they made this change. They actually dropped Gladiator Beasts from competitive to rogue. And so I would say maybe Glads are better than this. Glads they're a pretty okay deck. Gazaris is broken, Heraklinos is broken, sure. But at the time of this question being asked, and to be genuine to the answer that I gave to him then, before putting in this video, this deck, hands down. X-Sabers, they can hand loop you, but they're not as consistent. Gravekeepers, they can roll tribute you, but Gravekeepers, like another option, I think, are probably like one of the other busted decks of a rogue section that people just haven't used right yet. But I honestly, legitimately think that this Dark Calling deck is just insane. Using cards from a grave to do anything is always better than doing it any other way because they're free at that point. They've done their job, they've gone where they need to go, now you use them for something else, and you just get a lot of value out of it. So yeah, the Dark Calling deck is a deck that I think is absolutely absurd. At least for what it is. Moving on, Zico asked me, he says, is there anything Yu-Gi-Oh!, particularly retro formats, have different to other mainstream card games? Like, do they offer anything that other mainstream card games don't? I would say Yu-Gi-Oh! As a whole is obviously the rotating card pool just is not a thing. Your old cards are only useless by power creep. They are not, like, legitimately unplayable. And sometimes even because of the way the formats work, whenever new decks come out, older cards will be able to see play again in unique ways that they haven't before. Which is something that, other card games with their rotating formats just, that's just not a thing that happens. The card's only playable if they reprint it. And at that point, formats kind of become planned. Like, they know a card's going to have some relevant effect for the format, so they give it to you. Whereas in Yu-Gi-Oh!, it's accidental almost. Like, it's just a breath of fresh air compared to other card games where half of your collection just can't be used. But for retro formats, that's kind of taken to the extreme, where not only are all your cards always going to be useful because it's Yu-Gi-Oh!, but the format never changes. Like you never need new cards to compete. And so you can do this with other formats and other card games. People play Callblade and Magic. People play, RSE and Pokemon, Base Jungle Fossil as well. But for Yu-Gi-Oh, when you combine the fact that the base game doesn't require you, I mean, it kind of requires you to buy new cards because otherwise your old cards are going to suck. But like, it doesn't outright require you. Like your old cards are not banned for being old. When you combine that with the fact that there are a plethora of retro formats, so it's worth owning older cards for current Yu-Gi-Oh! Plus you can still play them in the Yu-Gi-Oh! Retro formats. That's something that Yu-Gi-Oh! Is always going to offer over other card games. And that's something obviously that people know. They talk about that all the time, about why they play Yu-Gi-Oh! Over something else, or what makes Yu-Gi-Oh! Better in their opinion than other card games. I would say in general, it has a unique mana system in that it just doesn't have one. And that opens up the floodgates for all kinds of crazy combos, especially in retro formats where they maybe at the time had not been discovered and therefore hadn't been hit by the ban list yet. And that's entirely dependent on the format. But just the fact that there is no constraint on deck building, which means that not only do you have a card pool that never changes in a retro format, you also can combine the cards in any way that you please and to create entirely different strategies than we've seen. And you see that in Edison. Every once in a while someone does the impossible and creates a new deck. Whether or not it's good, jury's out, but it's something that just is not readily available in as many other card games, just because of mana system, especially something like Magic the Gathering, where you have like the 5-color system, and some cards just refuse to work together because of needing too many colors to do the specific combos that you want, and so your deck's not consistent, and you have fetch lands, but in Yu-Gi-Oh! There's just none of that. Like, consistency is a concern, but you can fix that. You can bridge those gaps much easier than in most other card games, I feel like. So that is also something that retro Yu-Gi-Oh! Has over whatever other card game you really want to pick. And when it comes to games like Hearthstone, Shadowverse, the fact that the Yu-Gi-Oh! Cards exist, they're physical, and they retain value. Now, obviously, for Pokemon and Magic, that's also the case. But I would say the most popular card game other than Yu-Gi-Oh! And Magic would be Hearthstone. And, I mean, your cards aren't real. They don't have any value. And for me personally, I mean, that's kind of a bummer. So, yeah, the fact that, and Yu-Gi-Oh! Retro formats have a much bigger scene than other card game retro formats, from my experience. You don't find many people playing older Magic formats, and you find like no one playing older Pokemon formats. You might find someone on Untapped playing Base Jungle Fossil, but that's like it. So, there's a competitive scene for an unchanging format, which is really nice because it very rarely happens in any other card game. Moving on, Dueling Network 100 from YouTube. He asked me 4 questions, and they're all kind of related. The first question he asked me was, how do you define deck or format diversity? And he gives me the example of like Chaos Turbo with Night Assailant versus without it, etc., etc. Firstly, I would say that in order for a deck to be a different deck, it has to be completely different in terms of how it plays. If you use the same core engine, whatever else you add onto it does not make it a new deck unless it radically redefines how the deck functions. For example, if I go here to Diva Hero Beat, you can see that I have the Hero Beat core, Gemini Spark, Hero Blast, Miracle Fusion, Alias. I also have Deep Sea Diva and Spine Gilman. But I'm not even sure if I have a Hero Beat list that's... I don't... Oh wait, I do. Oh, no extra deck. Lovely. Yeah, but here you can see it's the same core. It's Alias, Spark, Hero Blast, Miracle Fusion. But instead of Diva, I just have more aggressive cards like Cyber Dragon and the Captain Gold. But they're the same deck. I don't see these as being different decks because the core gameplay is effectively the same. Like every once in a while, you make a Goyo Guardian, and of course, you have Diva Gilman for like Android and Catastor, which opens you up to good counters to a lot of things. Like I think that the Diva I think the Diva version is better than this one, but others will disagree. I probably need to make a side and extra for this. I don't know why I never did, but whatever. But yeah, I would say these are the same deck. And even something like Christia Sworn versus Light Sworn. Like I have Christia Sworn here, and then let's just say this is my Twilight list. It's kind of bad, but all Twilight lists are. I would say even to this extent they're the same deck. But I mean, Christia Sworn is where it gets iffy because with the Soul of Purity and Light, with Triple Hamster, the Heralds and Christia, it's obviously changes everything you're trying to do with the deck. So this is the point where I would say that once you go just like one step past this, it's a completely different deck. For example, Diva Hero, I have Stratos, and I have Diva, and I have Miracle Fusion, but it is completely different. Completely different to this, where I have Alias, Spark, Hero Blast. Like, the gameplay is completely and totally just, like, they're opposite almost. So, like, yeah, I would say that when it comes to like diversity within decks, the deck just has to be doing something different. Like, I mean, I'm sure I have a Chaos Turbo list in here that doesn't have Night Assailant in it. Look at this. See, look at this old terrible list I got. I have Skilled Dark Magician in the main, but 2 Spy, like it's awful. Like this list is probably from 2000 and like early 2021. I don't know. And you compare it to like this list, which is much cleaner. And it has the 3 Spy, and it has it's obviously the same deck. It's still trying to do the same thing. This is probably the cleanest list up here. The solve 20 monsters. Yeah. But these are all the same deck, very, very clearly. They're all trying to summon these guys the best way that they can. But when you compare to Chaos Control, now I have Scapegoat, Metamorphosis. Yeah, I play Triple Faith in this because it's a level 1, and you can side Creature Swap, and Token Thanksgiving apparently is something that I was citing when I made this list. Curse Seal because I have 18 spells. Like, there's just so many different functions in this deck. And then you compare it to Warriors, Chaos Warrior. This is an old Moxie's list, I think, actually. I may have just taken the Chaos Sorcerer out of it, so it's just regular Warrior, or whatever the kids talk about Warrior these days. But yeah, this is obviously very different from Chaos Turbo. So, like, Even though, I mean, they have BLS. BLS is the win condition, it seems like, in everything in Edison Format, but they're very different decks. So that would be my answer to the first thing, is that, like, the deck has to, like, even if it shares a core, once it's very different in gameplay, it's a different deck. But if it shares the same core, and, like, the different cards you add to it don't really change the basic functions of what you're doing, because, like I said, in Diva Hero Beat, just because I have Diva, doesn't mean I'm not trying to go Alias Spark Hero Blast, just like I am in regular Hero Beat. So, yeah. Then he asked, people often talk about diversity as a pro for getting into a retro format. And he gives, he says something like, people say, like, oh, you can play any of these 10 decks and your skill will be reflected in your performance. He says, do you feel diversity as you define it should be a make or break factor for someone getting into a format? No, but it is, sadly. The thing about diversity is that, like, it can be a good thing or a bad thing depending on what type it is. There's a pretty chaotic type of diversity where none of the decks do anything similar, they don't have similar counters, side decking is a coin flip because you don't know which 5 of the 10 decks you're going to face on a given day. You don't really have side deck cards that can account for multiple matchups, and I don't think Edison's really there. I think that is an extreme situation. I don't think Edison is to the point where I cannot side deck, which is where diversity becomes a problem. But as far as being a make or break factor, it obviously is for some people. It's like people don't want to play one deck formats because they get boring. I understand, that stance. Like, it is definitely like a little stale after a while to play the same matchup over and over. But I'm of the type that prefers to win games than play fun games. And, I mean, I guess it sounds bad, but, like, I would rather play the same matchup over and over and over and win 90% of them because I'm better than my opponent than play against 10 different decks and just not really have a say in how the game goes in half of them. And it's not, that's obviously also another extreme example. It's not really like that in Edison to the point where, like, you play against a matchup and you just have no say in it. There are some like that, like Value versus Frog feels very unfair. Like, if I'm the Value player, it feels incredibly unfair to be playing against Frog. That's not unwinnable. Even Game 1, which is very uphill, very difficult, but it's not unwinnable. But it feels very unfair. And so much of that matchup is just draw dependent. It's not play dependent. Like the Value player does not win because he outplays the Frog player. Most of the time. Like, usually what it comes down to is the Frog player gets his Frogs online and sacks over and over and over for Monarchs while you're setting Rykos and Hamsters. And you can't really pressure through a Monarchs because your attack is capped at 2300. It feels like there's very little you can do, and you can play through this. You can outplay them if they play very poorly. You can definitely outplay them. But against someone of relatively equal skill on Frogs, they just have the advantage of that matchup. And I mean, that's just the way it is. Like, I guess you can't complain about that, but, like, there's a degree of that I just, like, after a certain point, I can't stand it anymore. Like, that's one bad matchup. Like, Value against anything else, I feel fine. I'm not worried about the Frog matchup. I can side heavily for that. And every other matchup when I play Value, I feel like I'm doing okay. It's a great deck, so that type of thing, it just doesn't really bother me. But I don't feel like people should care as much as they do, because when it comes down to it, what should matter to people is whether or not the games they're playing are good, and whether or not they're learning about the game more, whether or not they're playing the best moves they can play, and getting the most out of their gameplay experience. Now, for some people, they don't care about making the best play, they just want to play against a bunch of random stuff, and for those people, then diversity is going to be what guides them to a format. That's why they like Edison, that's why they like Hat, because they can play many things, and play against many things. More competitive people, like myself, and like what I feel most of my viewer base is, are going to want to gravitate toward formats where they win because they play better. And very often that would be 1 to 2 deck formats. Some 1 deck formats suck, some diverse formats suck. It's not like, it just doesn't matter. It's not the defining characteristic of a good format, one way or the other. For example, I think Ravine Ruler, I think it'd be a pretty good format without return, but I think it sucks because of return. The person who draws return wins the game. And, if you remove return, you remove Sixth Sense. It's a very skillful mirror. Very good format. But, there are 2 cards legal in the format that make it just not very good. Meanwhile, Baby Ruler kind of has a similar issue, but it's a 2-deck format because of spellbooks. And that format can also sometimes be not very good because of Judgment into Kaiku. But then you compare to a format like Hat, where Sylvan, Girya, Infernity, Spellbooks, Hat, variants, Mermail, Firefist, it's just a lot of decks you can play, and it's very difficult to decide for all of them, because even though they're all Soul Charge decks or they're all Trap decks, they just don't have the same counters, and you really have to pick and choose your matchups, and a lot of times you actually just hard lose to certain matchups game 1, and it's not the worst format, but it is the case of a format where I think diversity is a bit of a problem. Edison is almost like this, but there are enough side cards that hit multiple decks where it's just not a huge deal. Like Snowman Eater's great versus Hirabi and Blackwing and Fairy, it's a wonderful card. And even Legendary Jujutsu Master, but that's worse against Hirabi because of 1800 defense. But I think Snowman Eater's better just because of the 1900. Dust Tornado is just a solid side deck because so many things have back rows. Pulling Varug, it hits Machina, hits Frog Monarchs, hits Diva Hero, hits Diva Zombie even. Anything with Caius you can almost, justify pulling Varug on that merit alone, but pretty much everything runs Caius has something else that pulling Varug hit, like Quick Draw has Debris. There are, DD Crow, Vanity's Fiend, Cyber Dragon. There's so many cards that hit multiple matchups that I don't feel like the diversity in Edison is that much of a problem anymore, and because I think it used to be, but we've gotten to the point where we've kind of settled the format into 7 or 8 decks that I think are just above everything else, and everyone knows it. And so, when every side card is hitting 2 or 3 different decks, you can actually get away with having 8 decks in the meta, which is something that I don't think is true of Hat format, for example. So, it's kind of a long-winded answer, but my answer to the whole thing is just no. Don't worry about how many decks you can play. Worry about whether or not the gameplay that you're getting is good. Edison format, honestly, at times has terrible gameplay. And some of that can boil down to matchups. Some of it can boil down to the cards that are legal. But focus on playing better. Focus on making the best moves, and you're going to realize that you're not enjoying the game because of the different things you can play or play against. You're enjoying the game because it's a fun game to play. Question 3. Similar to the above, do you personally prefer to play formats you feel with high diversity, low diversity, or is that not a factor for you? I don't care. As long as the format's decent. Like I said, if the diversity is a problem and it makes the format bad, then it makes the format bad. And if it makes the format better, because there are times where you have decks in the meta that make it so that your strategy doesn't work and you actually have to play your deck completely differently. And those are the times that I feel like diversity is a good thing, because it adds a layer of skill that you wouldn't have in a one-deck format. In a one-deck format, you play against the mirror most of the time, or whatever people are cooking up to beat the best deck, which you should just stomp anyway because of how the game works. But you kind of have like this scenario in these diverse formats where the literal core function of your deck just feeds your opponent, and you have to play extremely differently. For example, against Frogs and Edison, not putting things on the field, that's good. You might want to, when you're playing Kirby, you might want to be tempted to set every back row and summon Alias. But that kind of loses you against Monarchs. Or against Blackwings, you might be tempted, but that plays you into Icarus attack, whereas if you just summon the Alias and attack, get rid of their Blackwing, and then you set multiple back rows, or you only set one back row even. And like they go Icarus, and then your only back row is Spark, and you chain it. And especially Blackwings and Icarus attack. People hate Blackwings. I love Blackwings and Icarus attack because I think it adds that degree of like interesting developments and just raw skill to how you play the matchup. And I think that's something you can only really get with the Edison diversity. Now, if I were to pick between the two extremes, either too diverse to side deck and like sometimes you just run into matchups you can't win and stuff like that, or one deck format where I'm always playing against the best deck and it's my technical play and I guess to some extent my draws, but that depends on the format itself. But mostly technical play, I would definitely pick the one deck format. Like if I just had to pick, give me the tier 0 format. I think that just on a theoretical standpoint, they're better. But I really don't care. I think it just depends on the gameplay itself. And sometimes the diversity is good, sometimes it's bad, and I'll pick a good format that's diverse over a bad format that's tier 0, And I'll pick a good format that's tier 0 over a bad format that's diverse. It's the format. And that's just not going to be the reason it's good or bad, I don't think. Or, well, I mean, it can be, but it's not going to be the reason I pick it. It might be the reason it's good or bad, but I'm going to pick it if it's good. And whether or not it's, that just doesn't matter. And finally, he says, do you play Goat and Edison a lot because you personally enjoy them more than the rest, or because everyone else plays them and you enjoy it enough to play along? I like them, but really the former. I think that they're the best formats because they're the most competitive. Oh, other than Advanced. I think that, Go, Edison, Advanced are always the 3 best formats in the game, because it doesn't matter what the Advanced format is, it can be terrible, but it's the most competitive format at the time. And then Goat and Edison have the most competition in them, and so the level of play is always being driven. The innovations in deck building and the knowledge and the theory base of the format is always being pushed. That makes them better formats by default. Just because everyone is picking them and the collective mind working on the format is driving it to be better. That makes them the best formats. But the format that I would rather people do that with, we're talking formats like Necros, Zodiac, and my personal favorite format is Perfect Circle. And I wish we didn't play with Crush Card on Format Library because it makes it a little ignorant at times. But Perfect Circle format without Crush Card I think is the best format in the game. I think it has the most skillful interplay and interactions. It has some of the most intricate deck building choices because it is primarily a one deck format. But there are, I mean, even I've innovated strategies in this one deck format to prey on that fact. In the most recent Perfect Circle tournament in Format Library, I went 6-0 in Swiss with Gladiator Beasts. The deck doesn't have Darius, doesn't have Gazaris, Sequest, Cherry, doesn't have anything. But I built it to prey on Perfect Circle, and I played against 5 Perfect Circle decks and a burn deck, and I beat them all. So even in that format, even in that one deck format, there's still plenty to be done. And I just think it's a great format. I just think it's neat. I wish people would have played that format, but I think Crush Card and the fact that Format Library pushes prize cards as being legal in formats, notably Crush Card, like no other prize card matters. Let's be real. Like Dark End is good in Edison. Like it's fine. Like Dark End's not a problem. Tomb Caliber Knight, like Gold Sark, they're not problems. Gold Sark's also legal in Perfect Circle because it's the prize card of SJC right before it. There were like 8 of them, but we can play it in Format Library because we can. But I don't even play Gold Sark. I don't think it's good. The only other prize card that's like a problem, Minerva maybe in Zodiac format, but like whatever. So yeah, like it's just literally the fact that it's Crush Card. of all the prize cards, it could be the fact that it's Crush Card. I think if we would just collectively agree that Crush Card's not okay and not play with it anymore, that people would actually love Perfect Circle. I don't care one way or the other that much. I don't think it's like super a problem, but it doesn't really affect your deck building and like people playing like multiple lads and not Doom Cows, Dark Magician and Chaos to play around Crush Card hitting their everything, and it's just like I feel like if we didn't have to do that, then the format would actually be better. It would be more diverse, funny enough, and which I think it would be one of the situations where I think would actually be better from being more diverse, because you could just do more things that are more interesting. Just because, like, if it were a one deck format without Crush, then I'd be okay with that. But Crush just makes it very uninteresting. It makes it the boring kind of one deck format. And that's a shame because, like I said, it's my favorite format. But yeah, I think that Goat and Edison have some terrible gameplay at times. Edison more so than Goat, really. I mean, Goat has Trinity, but like Edison just... I get so mad playing Edison because it just... Literally some of the worst games of Yu-Gi-Oh! I've ever played in my life are in Edison format. And it's not like... I don't mean worst games as in like the games I've played the worst, or like the games where my opponent played the worst, but like just literally the most unenjoyable games of my Yu-Gi-Oh! Career ever, all time, have been Edison format. I think every single one of them. I don't think I've played... I think like all 5 of my top 5 worst matches that I've ever played are Edison format. The gameplay is just that bad sometimes because of like Brain Dust Shoot and Dark Arm, so many things that are just not good for the game. And I think it's a shame that like actually that's a lie. Tengu Planet format has the record of like the worst match I've ever played, but well, maybe not. I think my Tengu matches are worse on average, but Edison has, because I played so much more Edison, like it has the worst. I think Edison holds the title for worst because I played most matches in it. But Tengu Planet format's horrendous. That is a format that I wish people would never touch. But it's also, it's just a format. I mean, Yu-Gi-Oh's Yu-Gi-Oh. Definitely some of my worst matches are in that format too. Like I think that those two are just 2 of the worst formats for like getting popular. But at the same time, like I said, Edison's the format that's getting the competition. It's the format where the skill ceiling is getting pushed and where we're seeing better players succeed. So even though there are matches where you don't get to play, I mean, I guess it just happens. That happens in every format. I think it happens more often in Edison, sadly, and you don't see players in Edison with the win rates they should have. But yeah, it's definitely the former. I play Goat and Edison because they're more popular and they're okay enough to play. But if we could all collectively agree to play Perfect Circle, then I think Vor will be a better place. All right. Moving on, Kigi asks, how do we, as players, posters, etc., go about creating a more competitive community for Edison? He follows up, he says, I don't know how to do it personally without just being stringent on content that gets posted, like banning bad posters or not respecting the budget lists or just telling people they're bad. It's a very tough one because there's not really a good way to make people better without telling them they're bad. And it doesn't work on everyone. I think that the players who are destined to be good at the game, like, there's not really a destiny here, like, you do have to put in the work. But the players who you can look at and, like, tell that they are going to be, like, if they do put in the work, that they are going to be good at the game, are the ones that you can also tell they're bad, and they don't care. They don't take it bad. Like, or they do, and they use it as a reason to improve. Like, those are the two options. They can either just, like, be like, yeah, I know. Or they can be like, you're stupid, and then they go and try and prove you wrong. And either way, I think it shows, like, some maturity to that point. And, like, it's kind of funny because it's really immature to, like, on the surface, to, like, so defiantly try and prove someone wrong. But, I mean, when you're doing it for something like getting better, at, like, just improving in any field because they tell you that you're bad and you just want to prove them wrong so you get good at it, I think that's a mature approach. It's not to start an argument with them, it's to just prove them wrong. So, for one thing, I do think there's a way that we can, like, start telling people that they're terrible and, like, see which ones go that route and weed people out, basically. But you don't want to lose your entire community. We can't really just walk around telling people that they're awful, that they'll never amount to anything. It's like, it's a little rude, and you're not going to have players by the time that it's over. Now, the question was about building a more competitive community, so, like, wouldn't it be a good thing to get rid of players like that? Well, yes, but no, because, like, yes, in the sense that it would make it more competitive, and you wouldn't have to deal with it. You wouldn't have to deal with players like that anymore, but, like, we're not really out to do that. What we're out to do is get more players who want to be good. And, the more people who play, the more people they invite to play, and so the more potential good players that you have. So we can't really walk around doing that. As much as I would love to, duelist ground style, systematically exterminate bad players, it's like, it's not going to work that way. You can be stringent on content, though. You can definitely, tell people, like, hey, listen, this deck list is not good. Or people like, listen, your theory here, I understand where you're coming from, but it is wrong. And you can, like, try and educate them on, like, better ways to think about the game, which is what I think matters. It's not really about, like, the plays that you make so much, because you can always fix technical play, but you can't really fix how you think about the game without doing it consciously and, like, understanding that you're thinking about it poorly. So the number one thing that we really need to do is, like, kind of, like, tell people, hey, listen, your idea just doesn't work, and it doesn't work because of this reason. And, like, be specific, like, tell them why, tell them the theory behind it if you know it. And if you don't know what you're talking about, don't talk, for one thing. But, like, so that's one thing I see happen a lot, is that people will say something but they can't really back it up, and sometimes I'm a little guilty of that. but like, I would say just kind of, like, constructively criticize everything, break down people's ideas, and like explain to them like what's going on. And if they don't want to learn, they won't. And if they do, they will. And on top of that, there's also the War League, the Edison War League coming up in the Beast Mode Discord server. We have like 20-something teams already signed up. And there's going to be a huge replay database because you have to post replays after every match. Every team playing 5 matches a week. There's going to be just a huge amount of content to learn from, and we're going to have people who play bad, and we're going to have people who play really good. And it's a competitive environment. And so when you combine this competitive environment with like people who play really good being forced to post their matches so we can learn from them, I think that's a huge benefit. And I think that like I was kind of a naysayer to Edison World League at first because I thought we just wouldn't have enough teams and that like people weren't going to take it very seriously. But like the team rosters I'm looking at are quite good. You have Ring of Destruction and Crow's Nest, and then you have Beast Mode's team featuring himself, Xeris, Soul, James Ark's team with himself, Letiob, Indica, Matt Kalinda, who went to Worlds. You have Marcus Hayden, a YCS champion, maybe ARG champion, I forget which. You have some absolutely stacked, crazy teams. And I'm very excited to see what comes of that because I think that it will help to aid in competition in Edison format. Fancy Diesel, this is my favorite question. He says, in your opinion, what separates top tier players from above average players in Yu-Gi-Oh? And what are some steps you can take to reaching the upper echelon? So he asked this question probably over a month ago, and I've honestly been pondering it since then. He was one of the first people to ask me a question for this video, and I appreciate that. So, it's really about mindset. All it takes to be above average is to play well. I think that's it. I think to be above average at the game of Yu-Gi-Oh, you have to make better plays than average players. Which sounds easy, because it is. An average player is bad. I was talking to Frazier about this, and I mentioned him, like, I never realized, this is what I said, I never realized how bad the average player is. Like, I always took it for granted that the community that I play in has a bunch of really good players. And so when I'm looking at people that I play against in person, and I'm not going to name any names, and it's no one that I played against, like, in the Big Boy tournament this weekend, I played against some pretty decent players. But like when I see some of the people that I know in person play, and like I look at what their plays are, it's just like they don't play well. They're just, and so what I would for the longest time call bad play is average play, which is incredible. And I was actually like taken aback when I realized like all the people I'm looking at whenever I play like a really big in-person tournament. Like if I go to a YCS, there's 1,000 people, 900 of them suck. And when I would have thought that 900 of them suck, they're actually just okay. Really, only about 100 of those 900 suck. And the other 100 are doing very well. So then how do you separate the above average players to the top tier? Well, first off, there is a level of technical play that does ascend past above average. Like the mind games and the reads, you have to be incredible at those, but you can be above average and have good reads. You can be above average and pick up on mind games. You might not do it all the time. You might not do it completely accurately, but you can be above average and do it. but it's mindset. It's the sheer mentality. It's the understanding of the game at its deepest level. Above average players and legends, GOATs, the best players, myself versus Frazier, for example. I would say that me and him make the same play 98, 99% of the time in most game states. We just kind of look at it and know. Sometimes on videos I will call out a bad play we could do, and then he will correct me, and that is mostly for content. Sometimes it is actually the play I was thinking about making, and he's like, "You were stupid," and I'm like, "Oh." But most of the time it's for content, and I know that the play that we should be making. I would say that most of the game is spent looking at your own cards and deciding what to do with them. And then, there are situations where now you have to think about what the opponent has and what they're thinking you have and sorts of things like that. But the bulk of the game is played with your own cards. And that is something that every above average player and every top tier player understands. So in most game states, they're going to be making the same plays because they understand what they're doing. I mean, you don't get above average without being good. Above average is good. They're good players. So what separates them at that point is obviously that margin of technical play where you can pick up on those things. But most of it is just the deeper understanding of the game. It's this level of thinking about the game where it's not who's the beatdown. It's not the philosophy of fire. It's not that. It's tough to explain is what it is. But just being able to look at a card and understand its applications in the deck and versus the meta, and be able to discern that it's good or bad without playing it, or being able to look at a deck and understanding on its deepest level. The video I was going to actually record tonight before I recorded this one was about Quick Draw versus Machina versus Value Turbo, and I will do that video eventually. But the video was about how Quick Draw is a hamster Ryko deck that when you mill, you don't get any value from the mills. You need multiple cards in the hand to make your mills valuable. So you need the debris, or you need Quick Draw plus Dandy, or Quick Draw plus another monster if you mill the Dandy. Very neg plays. It just doesn't make a lot of sense in modern Edison. Versus Machina, where you mill the Fortress, but you still need cards in hand for your mills to function. But you only need one. You only need half the number of cards for your cards in hand to function when you mill with Machina, when you mill with Fortress. Versus Value, where when you mill the Sirocco and the Value, or you have Greffer with the Sirocco or the Value in hand, you send the other. You just have so many ways to get the cards into the grave and get value out of them while they're in the hand. You can normal Sirocco, then it dies and goes to the grave, and now it's there for value. You can just get value out of these cards in multiple locations. Whereas in Machina, if you draw a Fortress, you have to drop it in another machine, and only then do you start getting the free reborns off of Force. Whereas with Value, Dark Greffer at minimum turns the value in your hand into a real meaningful card. And when you mill the cards, when you mill both Value and Sirocco, you get free cards out of it. Your grave resources don't require a hand at all. You don't have to use any extra cards for your grave resource, which is what makes Value the better hamster Ryko deck. And there are some things, where Value is capped at 2300 attack sometimes, and so Fortress is better, and so the matchup's actually kind of in the favor of Machina, even though it's a less good deck. But if you ignore that and just look at the raw theory, the raw understanding of the game is going to lead you to pick cards like Value and Sirocco over cards like Fortress and Force. And, well, okay. Machina has Gear Frame, and Gear Frame's a stupid card. Let's be real. Machina is not a bad deck, but it's just a worse Hamster Raikou deck than Value. If you're going on the basis of Hamster and Raikou, it's worse than Value because it doesn't have the literal free cards when it mills. Like, you have to do something from your hand in order to make the mills matter, whereas with Value, that's not really the case. And but it's being able to look at decks under the hood and just like really understand like all the complex interactions that's going to give you in the meta, and like why it's going to make you do something like better than another deck you could pick. We were talking about Scapegoat with Frog Channel earlier, and I mentioned how like it's great with Substitute 7% of the time when you open Substitute and the Scapegoat together, but like maybe like 9% because of 1-for-1, but it makes you weaker to Oppression, makes you weaker to Bora. It's if you want to get value out of it without Substitute, some of the tokens literally have to die, which is not a difficult ask, but like into the meta where we're playing a bunch of Blackwing and we're playing a bunch of value, defensive cards that lose to Oppression are just not very good. And it's like just thinking about the game on that level where it's beyond like, oh, this combo is good with this, so I'll play it, and just getting into more of a mindset of how to approach the game is what takes you past like just being above average. So it's a combination of like getting so good at technical play that you can play perfectly pretty much nonstop, pick up on all these reads, all the false information your opponent sends, the mind games, all kinds of things like that. The things people talk about when they talk about the legends, Dale Bolito, he never makes a wrong read, or or in Modern Game Format, people talk about Ivan Rosito, who plays like a robot because he just always has perfect technical play. Those players are the top tier of the upper echelon, but that's not enough. And there are people who play to similar levels of technical play, but they don't think about the game in the same way. And so, it's the approach to aggression and stuff in deck building, and your ability to just like take situations like under your command because you have the experience and because like what you built the deck to do, and like just executing the game plan, because it just all intertwines, deck building and the technical play aspect of it to go together, on top of the reads, and then understanding the game to its absolute core mechanics. That's going to influence your deck building. James Ark didn't invent Value Turbo by being bad at the game. Like, he didn't just throw cards together. He didn't throw 40 cards together and say, oh, well, sometimes the Raikou will mill the Value in Sirocco and I'll win the game. Yeah, there was obviously a clever plan when he made Value Turbo, and he knew what he was doing with it. And, that's why he's one of the best players in Edison Format. Like, he just knows the game's inner workings, to a T. He just has the mindset to think about the game like that sort of way. And I don't think he plays better than 99% of it. He plays better than 80% of people for sure. But it's not just about technical play. Like you can match James Ark's technical play. I mean, it's not super difficult. Like obviously he does more complicated things than some people will do. So he definitely has that level of technical play where he has the Dale Bolito, Ivan Rosito technical play that people really respect from the top players. Where he does the unique things that only the best players will do. But most of James's technical play is just regular gameplay. And okay, it's not 80%, it's not 90% pro. I mean, percentages don't really matter, but the point is that most of his technical play is normal stuff that you should be doing anyway, that you can do if you're just an above average player. And it's that that last extra 5% of technical play that like really pushes him over the top, but also his understanding of the game when he goes to build a deck. And he says, what are some steps you can take to reaching the upper echelon of players? And it's you communicate with them, for one thing. Like, get inside their minds. Like, I have had Fraser Smith on the channel, and I've been on Fraser Smith's channel multiple times now. And just literally just talking to him has like increased some degree of my technical play, for sure. Like, the last time that I played Diva Frog before the Big Boy tournament this weekend was October, other than the one match me and him played on the channel together and testing. And yet, when I went to the tournament, I felt like I made close to, not zero, but close to zero misplays all day long. I definitely made a few that I could notice. I don't think any of it lost me a game that I wouldn't have lost anyway. But I made very few misplays with a deck that I never played because I had, talked with him and like we had tested together, and like his thought process in videos, it starts influencing my thought process. So being around those players can literally just ooze success into you. I mean, it's crazy. But on top of that, it's study. Study their games. Study their decks, play their decks, figure out like what's good about them. Like, start working on it. Like, don't ask them necessarily. Like, you should be asking them questions, but like when you want to figure out like why their deck is good, and like just try and figure it out. Like throw out the theories. Like start trying to understand the game on the absolute deepest level. But you have to master technical play first. Like, you have to master technical play first. You really can't like cheat code this. You can't be a top tier player without playing well. Like, understanding the game doesn't matter. Like, if understanding the game made you the best player ever, then I would be. But it's clearly I'm not, because I make mistakes that I should not be making, because I'm not perfect. Like, I don't have perfect technical play. No one does, but like you can be pretty close to it. And I'm not, and so it's like my understanding of the game is not a cheat code for me being the best player of all time. It's not going to be for you either. So the first step is master technical play, and the second step is to like shadow the players and like start thinking like they do, and it'll really give you like a huge boost to your success. Sometimes it'll feel instant, like overnight success, like you get better instantly, it feels like. But other times it's a slow burn, and it may take years. It's always going to take years to like master anything you do. But yeah, the first steps are going to be master your technical play, start making the right play every time, and then, or at least almost every time, because like I said, no one makes the right play every time, but start making the right play almost every time, and just figure out what makes them tick. And like, they all share the same qualities. Play style is not like a thing to them. They don't think, oh well, I'm always playing the aggressive deck and I'm always going to play aggressively, and when I'm playing a control deck I'm still going to play aggressively because I'm an aggressive player. They don't think like that. They make the best play. And so you've got to really get into that mindset as well. Just always be looking for like what the best play is. Don't ever settle for less of the best play either. Yeah. Finally, the two most difficult questions that I have been asked come from MW and Hydropump, my teammate. He asked me, "What's your favorite card?" Mega Rock Dragon. I've played it multiple times on streams and in VCs with people, and I used to play it when I was younger, and I really like big attack points. And then he follows up, "Your favorite color?" Blue. Alright guys, hope you've enjoyed the video. I'll see you later.